Okay, let's go.
All right. Welcome everybody to Unified Canine Connections Fireside Chat, episode 3. I am one of your hosts. I am Karen Baxter.
And I am Ed Michelle.
So this week we are all focused on the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning. And we're going to try and break that down for you so that it's in plain everyday language, no jargon. We just want to make sure it's very clear to everybody what do these terms actually mean. So we're going to start with the first question, which is, what is operant conditioning? So in my opinion on operant conditioning, it is outcomes, right? It's that learning outcomes from behaviors. So a dog does something or a person does something, and it either gets them something that they want or benefits them in some way, or it doesn't, right? And so if it does, they're going to do that behavior more. And if it doesn't, they're going to do that behavior less. That's how I see it.
No, I agree with that. I think essentially if something benefits you, you're more likely to do it.
100%.
If something doesn't benefit you, you're less likely to do it. And so you're learning through those outcomes.
Exactly. So that's it in a nutshell. That's operant conditioning. Now, within that term operant conditioning and training, we have what we call the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning. So I'm going to just talk. The first one is positive reinforcement. That's one that most people hear about in dog training. Then there's positive punishment, negative reinforcement, and negative punishment. So don't worry about knowing what those mean, because we're going to go through what those actually mean. So that'll help you understand what it is. So our first question then is, let's break those down a little bit in a little bit more plain language. So why do you think, Ed, that the quadrants are so confusing to so many people?
Well, I think you said it right there with the plain language. They're scientific terms, right? They're borrowed from human psychology. So they're not things that when you hear it at face value that you're going to automatically understand, but they use words that we understand, right? So something like positive, I think people immediately hear positive and you think good because we say, oh, that's very positive, or I was positive today, or I was feeling negative today, right? Whereas what we'll explain in a little bit here is they're actually much more of almost like a mathematical term, where positive is the addition of something and negative is a subtraction of something.
That's right.
So just that on the idea of we're not using plain language when we talk about this stuff. And if you've studied it, then you can understand it's industry lingo where we can talk quickly about what we mean. The person at home, like they don't have that insider knowledge. So then when we say positive reinforcement, they are going to make up their own assumptions on what that means.
And I don't know about you, but I know that in my studying over the years of dog behavior, I personally struggled really hard to understand what those terms meant. Right, and how to apply them properly.
Well, and sometimes I still do. Right?
Yes,
like
you're
when,
right.
When you're with a client and you're in the room and they're like, well, give me an example of this. You have to really stop and think and go, what would be a good example here? Right? You don't want to say so. And sometimes you'll say something, go, actually, wait, no, that's negative reinforcement. So it's difficult even if you know it, right? So that's why I like this type of series. And I think this is why we're doing this, is so that we can try and simplify it as much as possible without that pressure of a client standing right there.
Exactly. What do you think the biggest myths you hear about with reinforcement or punishment? So specifically with reinforcement or punishment?
Well, reinforcement, I think, is misunderstood a lot. I think most of the times when we say reinforce, people think, well, one, they think reward.
They think
right?
treat.
And they think treat, exactly.
Right?
They think, right, that's the biggest thing. Whereas there are numerous reinforcements. There's natural reinforcements, right? There's behaviors that biologically the dog finds reinforcing just because of their genetics.
You got an example?
Right? Well, let's say the retriever, retrieving a ball, right?
It's a good example.
We use a ball, but like historically it would be retrieving game, right? Gun dogs and scent dogs and those types of things. And so that means doing that type of behavior because of the years of breeding and genetics, just carrying out that task is reinforcing, and the dog doesn't even really know why. right? It's just something that they do. I think you can say that with a lot of what we would maybe say are like predatory behaviors or hunting behaviors, right? So the dog has to hunt to find food. And in our environment, obviously, I understand that that's not
we don't
necessarily
really
the
like
reality
that.
anymore,
Yeah.
right? But that is how they would find food. So nature almost says, if you don't find these behaviors rewarding or reinforcing,
You're not going to do them.
You're not
as
going
we said, right?
right?
Either you do it because it benefits you or you stop doing it because it doesn't benefit you.
Exactly, right? So
Yeah.
we've all seen a dog right away just start sniffing at the ground. That's a reinforcing behavior because it's something that can lead to the discovery of food, right? Or something to stalk or something to hunt. And so that is something that you don't have to teach a dog to enjoy that. They're just naturally going to.
I also think one of the myths with reinforcement is that it's automatically a good thing, right? That everybody thinks reinforcement must mean we're teaching them something good or the dog's learning something good. There's lots of examples I can think of where reinforcement is actually not good. So even if we went with the predatory response, right? So dog chasing a rabbit, for instance, is reinforcing for the dog, right?
Yes.
But we might not want them to chase the rabbit, right?
Yeah.
Or, well, the one that everybody talks to us about, dog jumping on us, right? And if we pay attention to that dog or do anything, because that's what the dog is doing, is they're trying to get our attention. So as soon as we give them attention, we're actually reinforcing the jumping. So jumping in our minds is not a good thing. We don't really want that.
Well, I think it's a tool.
It's a tool.
Right? And any tool can be misused.
100%.
So just because the concept is that it's something the dog is going to enjoy, if we reinforce a behavior we don't want them enjoying, then we're misusing that tool. So just because you're a positive reinforcement that this is what I'm going to use to train, but if we use that incorrectly, then we're going to be reinforcing a lot of behaviors we don't want the dog to replicate.
That's right. And of course, there's also the other piece of it, and that reinforcement has a negative side, right? We have the negative part, right, which is unpleasant. That's why it's negative, right? We're taking something away in order to behavior.
Before we get to that,
right?
though, should we maybe give the layman's explanation of the quadrants there?
Oh, we will.
Right, so that they understand what we mean by negative is taking away.
But that's what I'm. But in this question, this piece in particular, all I'm talking about is myths. So the myth of reinforcement is that it's always positive. That's a myth. It's not always positive. Sometimes reinforcement is negative, right? So it can be unpleasant, right? So we'll get further into that, of course, as we go on. So that, what about punishment? Biggest myth on punishment?
Oh, that's a good question.
I got a good one.
You go first then.
Same reinforcement, that punishment is always harsh, right? That it's always something evil or bad or painful, or it doesn't have to be in order to be punishing, right? So I'll give you a human example of that, right? Like a traffic cop sitting there catching me speeding, right? So they catch me speeding and they give me a ticket. That's a form of punishment, right? It doesn't hurt me. It hurts my pocketbook maybe, but it's not painful. I'm not getting smacked in the face or I'm not getting a beating or anything. So it's not physically painful to me, but it's still punishment, right?
Well, I think maybe a flip side of that too, specifically, is that sometimes people think, well, because I'm not adding pain, it's not as bad. Whereas because we're social creatures, if I just ignored you every time I saw you,
that would hurt.
That hurts us, right?
Exactly.
If you know, every time you come in and you're saying, hi, Ed, and I just turn around and walk away from you, I'm not hitting you, but that can be really damaging.
That's
right?
it.
So, and then I think one more before we move on there, I just thought of another one because this would be another flip side of this, I guess, is that you hear a lot where, well, because nature is punishing, then it's okay, right? So an example would be like a stove is really hot, so my kid might get burned. And it's like, that's a reality. They have to learn that. Absolutely. But I don't want my kid to have to be burned to learn that.
That's true.
Right? So just because nature has these punishing aspects to it, I think part of parenting and training and raising a dog or a kid or whatever you want to put in there is also helping them navigate those. Right? There's a famous term that's like a fool learns from their own mistakes, a wise man learns from other people's mistakes.
I'll give you a really good real life example of that. I'm the kid that touched the stove. I am a dummy, yes. And I was told it was hot, but you know the burners, when they're on low setting, they're not red, right? So it's really, is it hot? And I was a kid, so I went, boop, let me tell you, it's hot, right? So I end up with a big blister on my finger, everything. But in my household, I'm the oldest, right? So my siblings, they didn't touch the stove.
Right. They saw that
They
and
saw
learned,
my blistered
right?
finger.
Your sister
and
didn't
they
also
learned.
have to go touch it for her to.
Exactly right. Yes, I am that kid. Yes.
Okay.
So, alrighty. So let's talk about then what those quadrants actually mean. So when you explain it, the 4 quadrants, right? Like I'm talking to a 10-year-old child.
You're putting me on the spot here.
Sorry.
Well, if we're talking to a 10-year-old child, I'm going to put it in terms that the 10-year-old child would understand. Right?
Absolutely.
So let's use something that it would affect their life. So a clean bedroom, right? Make your bedroom clean, right? Don't mess it up, that type of thing. So there's, I guess, 4 ways that I can accomplish that. Right? So positive reinforcement would be giving them something for doing it, right? So I could say, you're going to get an allowance, right? Here is every time you clean your room, you're going to get $5.
Paid.
Right? Now, I could also use food. I could get every time you clean your room, I'm going to give you ice cream after dinner, right? Negative reinforcement would be adding something unpleasant, right? Or, sorry, taking something unpleasant. That's confusing.
Right.
And getting them to hopefully perform that behavior. So I might say, you know what, until you clean your room, no TV. Right? No more. It's just off the table. But then when they clean their room, they get the TV, right? Now, punishment side would be trying to stop a behavior, right? So this would be more in the moment when they're actively messing up the room, right? The one way to have a clean room is to prevent it from getting messy in the first place, right? So let's say they're throwing things around. Positive punishment would be going in and holding them. Right? If I hold your arms at your side, you're not going to be able to throw things, and then the room doesn't get dirty, right?
Yes.
And then negative punishment would be like, you're throwing things around your room, you're grounded, right? So I'm going to take away good things for a period of time. So you're grounded for 3 days, right? I'm hoping that them understanding that consequence is going to lead to them not messing up the room in the future, right? Does that make sense?
Makes sense. So just to sum it up, so basically what it means is reinforcement is I'm either adding something or taking something away to get you to do something.
To get them to clean the room.
And punishment is I'm either doing something to you or not doing something to stop you from doing a behavior.
So stopping them from messing up the room.
Stopping you from messing up.
So those are your 2 things. I can get them to clean the room, or I can get them to stop messing up the room.
That's right.
And then you can choose, well, what's going to be most effective here.
So you see, so reinforcement means adding, right? You're adding something. Right? Punishment means, reinforcement means, that's right. Positive means I'm adding something. Negative means I'm taking something away, right? And then reinforcement means I'm doing a behavior or I'm teaching a behavior. And then what's the other word I'm looking for? I forgot. Punishment, thank you. Punishment is to stop behavior.
But so you guys you can see why this is so difficult as a client, because even for us, when you start thinking about training through these lenses, it gets confusing, right? And this isn't the only be all and end all. I think it really matters for you to have a good understanding of it, but this is just one tool.
It's really a tool to teach skills or mechanics, right? It really doesn't do anything to do with emotion, has nothing to do with underlying causes.
Let's imagine my daughter is messing up the room because she's incredibly overtired from a daycare, right? So I can really focus on, well, how do I get her to stop dirtying the room, or how do I get her to clean her room after she does it? But if that's all I focus on, I'm really missing the huge piece of the puzzle here, is that she's burnt out, she's overtired, and at her age, she doesn't yet have the skills to calm herself down or realize, hey, I need to take a nap, or for her to be proactive. So it's really on me to also think about what other things can I address here to eliminate this issue from even happening.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Right. So now if we bring this back to dogs, it's very similar, right? So if I have a dog that is doing a behavior, if we go back to the jumping behavior, right? If we go to the jumping behavior, right? If we don't think about why that dog is doing the jumping in the first place, right? And all we're trying to do is either stop the jumping, right? Or teach another behavior without thinking about the underlying cause for the jumping in the first place, then we're going to struggle. We're really
Yeah.
the dog's going to struggle. We're really going to have and then it ends up being a well-being issue.
It's
because
funny,
we're
I
not
just
paying
had
attention
a
to
client
what
where we
they
were
need.
talking about this same thing, and they were talking about this excessive jumping and this excessive barking. But they say, I think we're reinforcing it because we give into it
Yes.
and or whatever, because he tends to do that when he has to go pee.
Right.
And I say, oh, that is part of what we have to think about then when we're talking about dog training is there an unmet need here
Yes.
that's underlining causing the behavior, right?
Yeah.
If you just fed them and gave them water about an hour and a half ago, and then all of a sudden they wake up from a nap and they start jumping and barking, it's probably pretty likely they have to go pee. So if you focus on just stopping that behavior, you're not satisfying that unmet need.
No, and it really is then a welfare issue. It really
Yeah.
is. The dog needs to go to the bathroom. You just need to figure out another way to get that need met fast enough that the dog does not have to jump on us. And
Well, and that comes
yeah.
down to that proactive, where it's like learn how
Yeah.
long your dog takes to digest something,
Yeah.
and especially if it's a puppy, which in this case it was with the client.
That's right.
Well, then we be proactive, and we should be bringing the dog out. And then if we bring the dog out and they go potty, and we bring them back in, and then this behavior keeps persisting,
Yeah.
well, now we can investigate further. And at some point, maybe we teach them another way to get our attention other than jumping and barking at us.
So now when you're talking to your clients, I know that I don't, but I'm going to ask if you do. But do you actually use terms like negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative
No,
punishment?
I will use the term reinforcement.
Yes.
Right? I don't put positive and negative on it at this point because I'm not really trying to get them to understand the operant conditioning aspect of
The
it.
terminology.
When I'm
trying to
getting
get them to do the
reinforcement, I'm
terminology.
trying to get them to understand that the dog has things that you can do to motivate them, right?
And it's going to mean that the behavior is more likely to continue if they are reinforced. So
And
I
like
think
very
that's the easier one for people to understand is that reinforcement means they're going to work for something. So if they're working for something, whether it's a ball or food or your tension, going for a walk or doing something else, that's all reinforcement.
Well, and that's the other way.
Yeah.
That's the other time when I'll talk about reinforcement is because I think we said this during the myths, is people just think about food, right? And I don't want to overfeed my dog.
That's right.
And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, one, you can use your daily rations through that the dog
right.
has to anyways. You don't always have to use treats. You can
That's
use
right.
their kibble and their food, but there's so many other types of reinforcement. So those biological ones, behaviors that you said, going for a walk, things that they learn are beneficial to them. You can use those as motivators to get them to perform a behavior, right? So let's say even in that instance where the dog's jumping up and barking, if you have created the cue of let's go for a walk, right? That is a quick way to remedy that barking and jumping. If they have to go pee, it's like, well, let's go for a walk. Well, they're going to go off to the door and they stop jumping up on you.
That's right. Exactly. And the other thing too, when I'm talking to clients and we start talking about punishment, is I like to explain to everybody that punishment doesn't actually teach anything. It just interrupts the current behavior and just stops them from doing it in the moment while the punishing is likely to happen. So I just talked to a client where they instructed to use punishment to stop a behavior a dog was doing. And it worked for a little while because the dog didn't want the punishment to happen. But eventually the dog punishment was not always there. The people weren't consistent with applying the punishment. So the dog got used to it, and then the behavior started to increase again because the dog didn't actually learn anything else. They just stopped doing the thing.
Well, I think that comes down to what you were saying. Well, there's those underlining emotions that are motivating the dog to behave that way.
Exactly.
If the dog really wants attention because they're ignored most of the day, let's say they work 8 hours and they commute, and then when they get home, they have kids and they have to cook, and that dog goes 12, 13-hour periods without attention. If you are just punishing away, they're signaling that they want to interact with you, the barking, the jumping, or whatever they're doing, and you're not then supplementing the fact that that dog feels incredibly ignored and unfulfilled, well, the dog is going to go back to those behaviors at some point.
Of course they will.
Because you didn't do anything to fix it.
No, that's right. Didn't teach them anything else. Didn't give them any other outlets.
Absolutely, right? You didn't say, well, hey, do this instead. I think that's a term that I say so often, especially when you're dealing with younger dogs, right? Because they're just blank slates at that point, is instead of thinking what you don't want the dog to do, think about what you would rather them be doing, right? So if that dog is jumping and barking and because you're eating at the dinner table and you're saying, well, I want to stop this behavior. It's like, have you taught the dog what to do while you're eating at the table?
Exactly.
Right? Are you just expecting them to just ignore you and walk away?
Or did you feed them at the table so now the dog
Right.
learned to go to the table and bug you, right? Because that's reinforcement. So very true. Well, I like that. So let's just wrap this up for everybody. And so if you could explain the quadrants in one sentence, what would you say?
Explain them in
One sentence.
Oh,
It could be a long one.
a run-on sentence. I'm good at those. Well, I think honestly, it's reiterating what we have talked about today, is that the quadrants essentially are tools that you can use to increase or decrease the likelihood of a behavior.
Yep.
Right? Now, each one can be misused. Each one can be abused. So it is really important you understand not only what the quadrants are, but the application of them. And you're looking, like you said, at the whole puzzle instead of just focusing on a behavior, which quite frequently is just a symptom of some underlying condition or need or...
Exactly. So mine is that the quadrants are something that changes behavior. It's the consequences that actually change behavior. So consequences just mean what happens at the end, right?
Outcomes.
So the outcomes, right? So the outcomes that change behavior. That's all it means. It doesn't have anything to do with how the dog feels or how they think, or how they are actually learning, right? And it's really good for skill building and mechanics, but not necessarily to change an emotional state or fulfill a need, right? So that's my one sentence on the quadrants. And I want everybody to understand too, to me, it's just a tool. It's not a training style, right? It has nothing to do with whether they're good or bad. It's not a philosophy. It's not a moral compass. It's just a tool, right? So I don't want anybody to think that if they hear, oh, that's a positive reinforcement trainer, that doesn't mean that their training methods are all good. I said in one of my other posts, all trainers are positive reinforcement trainers based on the fact that what that means is I added something, I gave the dog something to encourage them to continue a behavior, right? So all trainers are a positive reinforcement trainer. So it doesn't describe a training methodology. It doesn't tell you anything about how that dog feels in the moment.
Well, and I think that's why this topic has become so polarizing for people, is because these buzzwords, positive, they have become labels.
They have.
To summarize your entire training style, right? So if you're a positive reinforcement trainer, you only use good, humane methods. They don't talk about the misuse that can happen with positive reinforcement.
No.
And then if you're, the other term that people use is a balanced trainer, well, then you're willing to go into positive punishment. And then the criticisms of that, if you disagree, is you create these extreme views of the two. So if you're a positive reinforcement trainer, all you do is give the dog donuts all day.
Yes.
And if you're a balanced trainer, all you do is shock the dog all day.
Right.
Which, right, those absolutely exist. I think those are just bad trainers on both sides, right? I think the important thing that we need to understand when we're talking about these quadrants is what order, and I think we talked about this in the first video, is what order are we going to try these things? And ultimately, what is my goal for my relationship? And what am I trying to gain long term from using these things, right? So some methods might absolutely work in the sense of, let's say, positive punishment. It might stop a behavior, but you're going to have really negative offshoots of that if it's misused improperly or if you cross over to that line of abuse.
And if you haven't trained the dog on what to do, that's the key. Punishment just interrupts. It doesn't teach. You have to actually teach them what to do.
Well, and like we said, if it's likely to lead to something, or if it doesn't lead to a positive outcome, like something you want to avoid, you're going to avoid that behavior. Well, then if every time the dog views me, I'm associated with those negative outcomes, the dog's going to avoid me too.
100%.
Right? So we really have to make sure that we're not just leaning on one quadrant over another, that we have a balanced perspective. We have our own ethics and morals and value systems that we have in place. And ultimately, that's why we obviously have our method of what we're willing to do and how far we're willing to go, and things that we absolutely will not entertain. Not because I want to get into a debate that, oh, that won't work. That's not something I want to do.
That's it. Exactly.
I don't want to do it. I think it's going to negatively impact what I'm trying to achieve overall.
Right on. Any closing words you want to give to anybody?
And putting me on the spot. I think I would just say, instead of focusing so much on these terms, if you're trying to figure out the style of training you want to do, talk to the trainer.
Yep.
Right? Get an idea of what types of methods they're proposing.
Yes.
What are the outcomes? And ultimately, if you feel uncomfortable with something, trust your instinct.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you feel like, well, that might work, but that's not something I want to do, then don't do it.
That's right.
Right?
Exactly.
You are the one in charge when it comes to your pet, right? Your dog or your even cat or whatever you have. And it's just like with parenting. I watch some videos and I go, oh, that's something I want to try. I watch some videos and go, oh, that's interesting, but I don't want to try that.
No, exactly. And ultimately, at Unified Canine, we always want to think about the animal's well-being. So we really want to take that into consideration when we're choosing our training methods and figuring out how we want to help a dog navigate our world, right? Yeah. I think that's great. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This has been the episode 3 of Fireside Chats. Please hit the subscribe button, the notification little bell, so that you can not miss an episode. Next week's theme is going to be on enrichment. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be talking about what enrichment actually is, the various categories of enrichment, and give you some ideas through the week on how you can include more enrichment in your dog's life. And until then, we will see you later. I will put the links for our social media in the comment area, in the description area, not the comment area. If you have any topics you would like us to go through and research and talk about, please put it in the comments, or you can shoot us an email at info@unifiedcanine.ca. Until next week, see you later.
Bye.